Alright, Sony has announced the official controller for the PlayStation 5. It's not much. Sony has kind of been, trickling out info for us, but there's some key takeaways here. It's me, Jake, and let's talk about this. The PlayStation 5's official DualSense controller. Let the hot takes begin. Dropped out of nowhere as news on the PlayStation blog here today on April 7th, we got our first look at it. In the post, Sony says it's shipping out final versions of it to their developers working on first-party titles. So basically, the developers making the games who will use its unique features the most, they're getting their hands on it, so now they figured they'd show us. Okay, cool. First, let's talk design, man. This is probably the biggest full design refresh of the DualShock we've seen yet, which I'm surprised. I almost thought it would just have the same old look it always sort of has, but the design cues here are substantially changed up. Notice the curves and the different angles here. Still, if you just take away the black and white and maybe make it all black, now it looks much more like the DualShock 4. But you notice the general curvature, specifically around the outside in particular, it's quite different. The joysticks are now also housed completely in the controller. The round plastic circle things that hold them in are no longer lower than the middle of the controller itself, like hanging over. Very interesting. I think the slickest thing is the light now on the sides of the touchpad. That is super nice. Full disclosure, though, before we move on, if you guys watch our Friday news show videos, you probably know I'm a sucker for tech, especially clean white tech like this, so yeah, I am into this design. I have no real horse in the console war race, but I do like this look. I do wonder how well that white finish will hold up over time, though, with greasy, nasty Mountain Dew hands, you never know. But other white controllers do fine, so it might not be a big deal. But again, I do really wonder about the ergonomics here, the shape, the kind of rounder, more curved shape. Sony said it has been tested on a wide variety of hands and is optimized, but of course, only time will tell when we actually have it in our hands. That type of stuff you can't make judgment on until you hold it. I also think it's funny we've immediately seen people bringing up the PS3 Boomerang prototype. Like, hell yeah, dude, this is probably the closest we'll get to that. I don't know. I was a fan of that. Also, shout out to @SteadyCam on Twitter who tweeted this at me. It's kind of got like an Avengers Endgame Stark time travel suit thing going on. Very curious to hear what you guys in the comments have to say about this controller overall. Anyways, moving on, you can see it is charged and connected via USB-C, aka the best USB port. This is something that we've already kind of known, but it's nice to actually see it here in action still. The share button looks like this now, although Sony points out that it's no longer the share button, but the create button. Okay, it will have the same share button features, as well as new stuff Sony simply hinted at that they'll talk about more at a later time. Now take a look at the triggers here. Definitely a change, but not really an overhaul. Still doesn't look quite like a full enough trigger if you ask me, but in this news post, Sony outlined what they briefly mentioned in the past. These triggers, L2 and R2, will have adaptive triggers built in so you can, and I quote, truly feel the tension of your actions, like when drawing a bow to shoot an arrow. That sounds kind of cool and innovative, like they resist how much you can push them for certain points. Sony also reiterated the use of haptic feedback in the controller as well, to have more sensitive and more varied vibrations, like feeling different textures on different roads in a racing game, stuff like that. This is where Sony's whole DualSense thing comes into play, because they wanted to incorporate a more of a sense of touch, the feeling in your hands when you play. The gimmick? I don't know. Maybe Sony is saying that this, coupled with their new 3D audio tech, will all really heighten the immersion. But I think, again, that's down to the individual player to decide. Regardless, Sony has said that they, and I quote, took thoughtful consideration into ways to maintain a strong battery life for DualSense's rechargeable battery, and to lessen the weight of a controller as much as possible as new features are added. Now, battery life and weight are, of course, the biggest things for me and a lot of people. All of the new bells and whistles are great. You can add those on, but still, at the end of the day, you can take them away. You still need just raw input. That's what's most important here, and I'm glad that they acknowledged weight and battery life. One other thing I want to point out that isn't getting enough attention, this controller will have a built-in microphone array, which Sony says will, and I quote, enable players to easily chat with friends without a headset, ideal for jumping into a quick conversation. But of course, if you're planning to chat for a longer period, it's always good to have a headset handy. Yeah, that to me, that is actually kind of cool if you think about it. There's some potential here, but how many casual folks are gonna have this thing left on while they're playing a game with the TV on full blast, with their kids crying in the background, with the stereo on? I could see it now. I could hear it now. Hopefully the push to talk is like default on. Well, I'm glad that we know what it looks like now. One, because it's just something fun to talk about, but also two, looking at the controller, you can kind of get a glimpse into the design philosophy of the hardware box too. What that's eventually going to look like when they reveal that. Now, the controller features sound like nice additions, not totally distracting gimmicks or anything that takes anything away, but, you know, maybe not blow the doors down. I love the way the controller looks. Like I said, I just hope it feels good to hold and can disappear in your hands when you play, because that's the most important thing, and we won't know, of course, until we get our hands on it. But that's what you need to know. Of course, we want to hear from you guys in the comments. Be sure to let us know if you would have sex with this